Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Proof of Delivery. I know it's been a couple of weeks since you've seen mine and Ken's faces gracing your LinkedIn or Twitter screen, but after some end of summer vacation, we are super glad to be back. I haven't had a chance actually to watch our special guest fill-ins and Leffler and Chad, but I have no doubt it was potentially a spicier episode than you and I bring every weekend.
I thought it was great. I watched it on vacation. It was poolside. The entire family was forced to watch it. 10 out of 10, I would say. I mean, conservatively, 10 out of 10.
All right. I'll have to go check it out.
It was good.
Excellent. Well, we are back at it here in the office, or not in the office, as it were. A couple things going on this week that we'll catch everyone up in. But before we get into that, I have to ask Ken, what's your thought on early Ohio State prognosis for the rest of the year?
I am very happy. I'm surprised. I am taking my 10-year-old to the first game of the year. We skipped the Texas game and watched it at home. And
that was a good call.
Yeah, at noon, whatever. But he's already got his backpack full of Sour Patch Kids and 9 other assorted candies and chips and snacks. He's got like 3 different sodas. He's ready to rock and roll. So I think higher ceiling than last year, probably lower floor. They're inexperienced. They're going to make mistakes, but that mean Ohio State defense from the Tressel era seems back. So I'm excited for it.
Well, Godspeed. I'm going to
Notre Dame, though, not so much.
Not the start you'd want, though. Made it a game. First ever college game for Carr. He's 19. And the offensive line just kind of collapsed on the last series. So when a kicker makes a 60-yard field goal to win it and you've fought back from a pretty lousy first half, I'll take it with a first-time quarterback. We're going to the Notre Dame A&M game on Saturday night in South Bend. So
I thought Carr was great genes, right? He's Lloyd Carr's grandson. Apparently got stiff-armed out of even getting recruited to Michigan, which I thought was interesting. But I think Notre Dame will be in there. Marcus Freeman is a great coach. If you can make them like the casuals like Notre Dame, you're doing something. And I think Marcus Freeman is great. Hey, I want to give a shout out too to Georgia, who is a Mountaineer, our head of PR and communications. They are in the backyard brawl this week.
Georgia's not on screen, but Ken, who do you think you got? Pitt?
Well, they lost to a MAC team last week, so not a great time to be a Mountaineer, I'd say. But I think things are looking up with Rich Rodriguez, and I would take West Virginia to upset Pitt. That is my bold prediction of the week.
I know something about losing to MAC teams, and it's going to be fine, is all I have to say. So,
well, we play Ohio this week in the shoe, and the last time they played, their mascot tackled ours in a very unscripted way, and it's held a grudge for 14 or 15 years. So I would not want to be Rufus this week, prowling the sidelines of Ohio Stadium.
I gotta watch that. That's wild. Cool. Well, so lots going on in the world of college sports, but also lots going on in the world of freight. We had a couple of big events actually this week in Chicago. Both our Engage visit that's still going on, which is when we really bring our broker sales team out into the field, hit a city that has a ton of brokerages and freight moving in and around it, and just get in the office and sit down with our customers and our users and hear what's going well. Where do they need some help? What are they seeing in the market? What are they looking for from us? In addition to our Shipper Summit. So I'll just talk a little bit about Engage, and then we can talk more about the Shipper Summit that happened as well. But I think what I'm hearing, and we'll get into this a little bit more from our market update later in the show, is that everything is just kind of flatlined. And I'm hearing brokers across the board start to wonder if something fundamental has shifted in the market that we don't fully understand yet over the last couple of years, because we have never been in a prolonged period of just, Ken, you post about this all the time, but just really neutral of not a whole lot happening. And the last couple of years, we've been in this recession now for a little over 3 years, coming up on 3.5 years. General consensus has been, okay, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Things are going to pop. The market's going to get tight. We'll see little pockets of that here and there. And over the last month or so is really the first time I've started to hear a broad scale sentiment shift of something may have changed and we are not going back to where we were. So that's really what I got out of the office visits. At the same time, hearing a lot of great feedback on data and what companies are doing with data, implementation of early AI tools, what's working there, what they're learning quickly, A lot of good feedback on some of our new product launches that we've got coming out, like our carrier management suite. So there's still reason for optimism and still some brokerages that are growing. But overall, I think there's not this blind optimism that things are going to bounce back maybe next quarter, kind of the perpetual quarter or two out rebound that everyone's always been talking about for the last 3 years.
Yeah, we can talk more about that when we get to the market piece. I think there's a lot of sentiment and not backed by a lot of data just because we don't have it. We've not operated in a cycle like this in a high interest rate environment. I think that's like if you build it down to the modern history of freight data and analytics, which as a DAT employee, I love that entire time period is encompassed in the history of rate view, because before that, rate analytics didn't really exist in a centralized real-time way. We haven't seen it happen in a high interest rate environment. I mean, at any point in our entire history of doing this, you could have gotten a mortgage for like 4%, right? And the last 3 years, we've seen rates in the 7, 8, 9% range. So I think that's something we could talk about a little bit later, but that is something I would encourage folks to think about.
Awesome. Well, so that was Engage. I think we probably had at least 50 or so brokers in Chicago. And we've still got folks out on the field today right now. We had a happy hour on Tuesday night. That was great to see a bunch of partners and friends around the city. So please let us know if you've got a city you're interested in having us come to. We try to do these every couple of months, and we'll already start planning our next one soon. Ken, I wasn't able to attend the Shipper Summit since I was tied up with the office visits with our brokerages, but tell me a little bit about kind of any highlights there, any feedback from shippers. I heard Shipper really well attended. Shippers love the opportunity to network it with one another. Anything else?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of the same. They're not facing a ton of rate pressure. They're not facing a lot of service pressure. They've had 3 years to get things in order. I think they're going further up the routing guide, bolstering things at the top, benefiting from these market conditions. I don't think they're overall happy with the economy. I think the thing that we in the freight industry need to always remind ourselves, I don't care if you've been doing this for 50 years, these people don't consider themselves shippers. They're cereal manufacturers or tire manufacturers or retailers, right? So like their core business is subject to a lot of different pieces and parts that aren't germane particularly to shipping. So I think retailers are probably feeling a little squeezed right now. People into building products, think like the big box retailers. We don't tend to think in the modern era as like bottled sugary drinks as luxury goods, but those tend to be things that get purchased more infrequently when economic conditions are tight. So I think weak demand, but also ample capacity and no pressure on rates would be my TLDR of the shipper kind of ecosystem.
Sounds fine. It's
yeah.
kind of probably the takeaways, I imagine.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the market. I'm going to pull up a tweet from you from a couple of days ago, Ken, on just what we've seen over the last many months. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah. So I'm glad you only snipped that tweet. Stuck. We've all felt stuck in traffic. That is the only way that I can describe this market. This is not. So if you look at contract rates, so take spot's only 15% of the market. It's our 15% of the market, so we love it the most. But it's 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25% of the market, depending on where we are in the cycle, right? If you look at the contract market, it's been like a year and a half where contract rates haven't moved more than a penny in either direction. That on its face should set the table for being absolutely stuck. If shippers aren't feeling any pressure, and conversely, big asset-based carriers and brokers aren't applying any pressure, it's because they can't. So things are very, very, very static in a way that if you look at this chart, I know it doesn't seem like a long time, but this is over 15 years worth of data. So a decade and a half where we have seen markets in relatively constant motion. That is like the thing that I would always tell newbies coming into the freight market is like, if you don't like it today, just wait a few weeks, it'll be different. And that's just not been the case. I think for the first year, Kary, wouldn't you say it felt like a nice port, a quiet port in the storm after COVID, probably for a lot of operators. Yep. And then the year after that was like, okay, I get it. Maybe you needed 2 years after that, but let's get things going. And now kind of dragging into year 3, it's like, hello, like what's going on? So I know there's a lot of theories around why that might be, but I think the brass tacks of the matter is demand's what pulls you out of these things. There hasn't been much. There probably was going to be some before the tariffs came into effect. And there's still too much capacity as a result. We're probably still 8 to 10% oversupplied on the capacity side on the pre-COVID trend.
How do you measure that?
So actually, no one talked about interstate motor carrier counts in I've been doing this for close to 15 years, because it basically just followed GDP. If you looked at like the net pool of capacity over time, the market would go up and down, but like total net carrier counts went up as a function of how the macro economy was growing. Well, during COVID, that completely flipped on its head, and we had like a huge deviation from that line. And that has come down since. But what you'll see is that, like, if you follow that 10 to 15 years of pre-COVID trend, the line hasn't quite dipped down to where that trend would have been had it kept going in a constant up and to the right the last 3 years. So, it's about, like I said, 6 to 8, maybe 8 to 10%, depending on how far back you go. But that still represents, 15 to 20,000 carriers that may have to go out of business if it's going to be a pure capacity-driven recovery, which is why I say all the time, capacity will eventually attrit to a point where it recovers the market, but that's not what we should all be hoping for. We should all be hoping for demand to drive this market into its next cycle.
And you talked a little bit about interest rates earlier. Help us walk through that a little bit more. How might that be influencing the inflection of this curve or not?
So it's on the demand side, interest rates, shipping, and our industry, full truckload, is very sensitive to new home construction, large, durable goods. So goods expected to last more than a couple of years. Think like washers and dryers and home appliances and patio furniture, grills, all that. You don't buy as much of that when interest rates are high because you're not moving as much. You're not remodeling your home. You're not taking out home equity lines of credit. You're not doing any of those things. That means builders aren't building, sticks and bricks aren't being shipped around. That's kind of the demand side. On like the supply and then sort of like the overall macro sense, it's very expensive to carry inventory when rates are high. Think about it. Inventory is future sales that have yet to be processed. And a lot of times you're using working capital to fund your inventory, and working capital is a lot more expensive. Working capital is 500 to 1,000 basis points more expensive than it was even as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, as a direct result of inflation, if you're kind of trying to stitch this all together. So as a result of all of that, we're back to that just in time. So remember during COVID, right? Freight is very notorious for saying something will never happen again, and then like a year later, it happens again. So what did shippers say? We're never going back to just in time. We got burnt 2 cycles in a row. And guess what they're doing? They're back to just in time because inventory is very, very expensive.
What I think is interesting about this is I spend most of my time with brokerages talking to brokerage customers is how are folks actually reacting to this and what is the implication here for our industry? And I was having a couple of conversations earlier this week on just that. And what I'm hearing by and large is that regardless of what happens in this market, the necessary operational impact that is going to the kind of financial and managerial impact of this on freight brokerages is that reps are going to be forced to book more loads per day. To make the economics of freight brokerage work, some of the cost is going to have to get stripped out and kind of redistributed, if you will. That investment is going to have to get redistributed across fewer fixed costs like employees. I don't know what the implication for commissions might be here, but by and large, that's what I'm hearing, which is why you're probably seeing all of this investment in AI, a lot of the work that we're doing with our Convoy acquisition. What are your thoughts on how brokerages are responding to this?
I forget who posted it, and forgive me because it was super well articulated, but you're right, because basically your cost to serve, so your non-transportation expense, is probably one of your sole competitive advantages in a knife fight like this market, right? Yep. So if you're serving your customers, I'm going to use an exaggerated example. If you're serving your customers for $20 a load and your competitor is serving them for $100 a load, that gives you $80 a load of complete green space between you and your competition to flex and maneuver and grow share and shift things around. So I 100% agree with that. Broker margins are in the absolute tank right now. I posted, again, according to the rate cabal that is DAT. But broker margins are like that's a joke, by the way. That's sarcasm.
No. I was going to say that's a different podcast that we'll host.
Yeah. The rate cabal with Ken and Kary. They're at about 12.5%, which is low. So you got to figure that's your margin that you have to pay all your people, pay your rent, pay your insurance, pay your software and TMS providers. That's not a lot to go around. and little changes in that have big impacts. So I agree completely. It's a focus on efficiency. We're seeing a ton of inbound with Convoy platform for that specific reason of like, how can I automate the easy stuff and focus on the hard stuff?
Yep.
It's tough. And the problem is, I think the longer this persists, normally what happens, not to belabor this, the market bottoms for a very short period of time. It starts to go up. Brokerages get squeezed, but that only happens for a very short period of time. Talk about a couple quarters. The problem is that the margins are getting squeezed before the market has started to really recover yet. So when it recovers, margins will get pinched even more. And so I think there's going to be a little bit more heartache and heartburn happening for a couple quarters once the market does earnestly move into recovery.
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic person. But I think that's just, if you're being a realist, that's probably, if we're going to enter the recovery at 12.5%, 12% industry margins, they're probably going to dip down into the high 11s, low 11s before we see full substantive recovery, which is a tough pill to swallow.
I think we're all off the crystal ball thing where none of us know, we've finally fully appreciated that none of us know what's going to happen because this is not consistent with other patterns we've seen. However, I can't help but ask any predictions for peak season that we're entering right now. And no is a fine answer.
I mean, I like the Chris Jolly approach here, which is like, whether the market's up or whether the market's down, there's things you should be doing to like build and maintain your relationships with your shippers, build and maintain your relationships with your carriers, be as optimized as you can on the operational side of things. Pick the right vendors, right? And I mean, make sure that you're positioned when the market does recover to beat everyone else. Like, it's going to recover. This sense that like the market's not going to recover, where does that terminally end? It only ends in autonomous. So if you think you're just going to like short the string, cut it and tie it off, and we're in autonomous vehicles, sure, that's certainly a way to think about things. But like, there's going to be humans driving truck, and they can't do it at these rates forever. So it's going to have to go back up.
Let's play it out though. What if the market doesn't recover? Just as a thought exercise, what would happen here if we just continue to putter along for the next 12 months, rates at the same place? Are we going to start to see brokerages shut down? What is that going to look like?
It's going to be immense consolidation. I don't think it'll happen, but I think on the carrier side, you're going to see consolidation. Okay, let's talk about like a plausible scenario. I think you see carrier consolidation. I think you see a pretty big swing away from smaller carriers into larger asset-based carriers that can spread that capital across multiple power units, millions and millions of miles.
Yep.
On the brokerage side, you're going to see consolidation as well. I think that's just, you're going to see that anyway. Brokers always consolidate. Think about like WEX and Global Trans. Like, that's a key, like they all, RXO, Coyote to UPS, Coyote to RXO, those are things that just happen when markets kind of get back into the swing. I mean, the extreme scenario is the government has to come in and like partially re-regulate trucking. Like, if something broke fundamentally and there is an instability in a core part of our American way of life, that goods can't get where they need to go at a price that's economically viable, the government will have to step in like they do with the railroads and other critical supply infrastructure, right? The interstate system isn't ran on like a cost benefit analysis. It's like, it needs to be done. So I think that's probably like a less than 5% probability. But if you're asking like the terminal end, if this thing never does recover, is like the government has to step in and fix something.
Yep.
But they fix it through consolidation. It's not like they're going to get like PPP checks to small carriers. They're going to go to the big asset-based fleets and quasi re-regulate them, I guess,
and incentivize them to buy up others and restructure the market a bit. Yep.
That's what happened in energy. A lot of these markets that did deregulate, some of them have went back and re-regulated because what they found is like they couldn't stably create cost to serve for the customers because your lights need to go on. And so they re-regulated some of these areas.
Fascinating stuff. Any other thoughts on this for now? You want to share any wisdom with our loyal listeners?
I think you can go through a crappy situation with an optimistic or a pessimistic attitude, and I would encourage you to have an optimistic attitude because that's when we perform our best. So it's hard to think of ways to innovate and get through a tough time when you're just sorry for yourself and mad at the market. So be positive, be proactive, and when the market recovers, be like super poised to capitalize and beat everyone else who's moping around and sad tweeting on Twitter.
Don't sad tweet. That's the lesson.
That's
cool.
The lesson.
Well, let's just talk about a little bit what we've delivered. While I've been out, I think the single biggest probably product release that DAT has had in quite some time outside on the freight match side, we of course have released our shipper broker spot rate. So speaking of being ready to pounce and take advantage of the market when things do start to change, that's a whole other conversation on the shipper broker spot rates. But on the freight match side, we have been long talking about and working on our carrier management suite, which is going to enable brokers to really be more in control of how carriers access and use the load board. We're in beta right now with about 30 customers. We just launched a couple of days ago, so it's still very, very early days, but we're thrilled to be building this culture of rapid experimentation and learning. So excited to share more as we start to get feedback. If you're one of those brokers in the beta, I know our team's already talking to you probably daily, and we're looking at what's happening out there, but we're really excited to see how this is going to empower brokers to use the load board to work with quality capacity and qualified capacity.
It's cool stuff. I think it's really, really cool stuff. I think as we flesh that out to be able to like only tender loads to Buckeyes fans, I know that's on the pipeline, will be awesome.
That's definitely the next filter that's in there.
I'm not going to give away any trade secrets, but and not our trade secrets, but one of our customers. But I was talking to a customer, I was on site with them, and they gave us a really cool product idea, which was if I get an inbound call from a carrier off the load board, and I know that that area code is the home area code of where the load's delivering, it is a dramatically different negotiating environment than any other area code because that driver wants home. So like, as you think about what we can flex and the muscle that we have in this particular tranche of work, it's starting out in a beta, very simple. But if you can like instantly give the right load to the 5 to 10 carriers, 10 to 20 carriers that are most apt to want it and run it for the most mutually agreeable price, it changes everything. So it's really, really cool, I think. And all the credit to the product teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, great to catch up, Ken. Thanks for all your insights on the market, and go Irish.
Go Bucks.
All right. See you next time.